Hello, hello. I think we are live. Accepting your heating and air questions, and I think I finally got everything set up here. It took me a minute to get everything rolling this week. I had a Zoom call the other night, and I think it was a Zoom call. Yeah, it was Zoom, and my computer, one of my computers, decided to just up and restart in the middle of it. So my luck with electronics is interesting sometimes. So apparently, or I'm sure it's something in my settings, and that I could have delayed that somehow. But anyway, yeah, me and electronics, especially when I try to go live doing something, is a lot of fun sometimes. And by fun I mean not fun. But anyway, we are accepting your heating and air questions live. Um, I've got a few things that I'm going to cover tonight, even if we don't get a lot of questions. I've got a few things that we're going to go over anyway. But I just want to say we've had a pretty busy week here, and I've got a few videos that should be going live later this week. So, but if you do have a question, heating and air related, or even I guess if it's not heating and air related, feel free to ask. I probably won't know the answer if it's not heating and air though. But we did get started a couple minutes late here, so hopefully we didn't lose anybody in that process. Sometimes when you expect something to get started at 8:30 right on the nose, and a couple minutes have gone by and it hasn't gotten started, and you just figure you missed it or something. So hopefully that didn't happen to anybody. But I did want to take a moment and shout out to, I don't do this very often, but I did want to shout out a company, and they're either in or near Gaithersburg, Maryland. And it's a company called G&B Heating and Cooling. Hopefully that doesn't become a mistake calling them out and, saying something good about them, because the job's not complete yet. But I've got a lady I'm helping with our guide, new HVAC guide, where we help homeowners through the process of buying a heat and air system. And I've got a lady I've been helping for a while now. It's been a couple months, I feel like, from the beginning. And we finally found G&B. Let me look them up. G&B. G&B. The thing that's been great about them so far is they have, hey Brian, good to have you, pal. The good thing about G&B so far is they have, let's see, Gaithersburg, Maryland. So they might not be right in Gaithersburg here. Let's see. Here they are. Olney, Maryland, maybe is how you say it. Let me see if I can share this tab. So here we go. So G&B Heating and Cooling, this is the company, and they have so far been great. This lady that I'm helping has had a ton of questions, and they have, I think sometimes there is an aspect of, because I help folks with our guide, and there are times when folks will, they almost kind of scare the heat and air company away, like they just, maybe, and I know that's horrible, but I'm just being honest. Sometimes if you become too big of a thorn in their side, even if you mean well, but, through all the questions and through all the, I think she's asked them for several different quotes, and I'm sure it hasn't been the funnest, experience for them, or, I don't know. I mean, maybe it has, but they have just been great from what I can tell. So she was just messaging me this morning. I think it was this morning, and saying that, maybe it was yesterday morning, but saying that she is going to go ahead and pull the trigger and go with them and buy a heating and air system from them. So through all of that, they're going to get a sale out of it. And so congrats to them. But, I saw their quote. Their prices were, especially for Maryland, seemed very reasonable. And They just, so shout out to them. That's not something I do very often, but I did want to do that. I don't even know them. Hopefully this wasn't a mistake, saying something about them. But if you're in Maryland, this is the company that she used or is going to go with, and they have been a pleasure so far. So thought I would just share that, and we'll get back to our chat here. So Ryan says, "Hey Josh, I just put in a new HVAC system here in Ontario, Canada. And I wanted to say thank you for helping me learn about equipment options and advice. My new hybrid system is great." That's awesome, man. I appreciate your kind words. When you say hybrid system, are you talking about, did you go with like a dual fuel system or some other type of system? I'm just curious. Here in Virginia, so we see folks, if they have a furnace, they'll go two different ways. So, and it usually the determining factor a lot of times is going to be the kind of gas that they have. So if their furnace is natural gas, they'll usually, and a lot of times they'll go with a straight AC outside, because natural gas is, relatively inexpensive in comparison to electricity. And then if they have propane, LP gas delivered to their home, then a lot of times they'll go with some sort of dual fuel system with a heat pump outside. So that way on mild days, it's running off the heat pump. So anyway, it's just something that we see a lot here. I don't know if everywhere is like that. I'm sure there are a lot of places like that, but that seems to be usually the determining factor on whether they go dual fuel or just one heat, one cool, straight AC. What do you think about a potential ban on gas appliances, including furnaces? I think that some states are trying to do it. I think California's already either passed a law or at least proposed a law where they've banned them. And then I have heard, I was in a class probably a couple months ago now, time flies. But I was in a class where they talked about the phase out of non-condensing furnaces. So these furnaces that are 80 to 82% AFU ratings, rumor has it that their days are numbered across the nation. There's a big push for this. It's one of the things we're talking about in one of the videos I have coming up, because let's just say tomorrow our country decides, or our continent, so we'll include Canada with that too. So let's just say tomorrow that the US and Canada completely rule out furnaces entirely. So there are parts of the US and certainly many parts of Canada that use mostly some sort of fossil fuels to heat those homes, right? And the thing is, when you switch to a heat pump, the problem becomes sizing, right? Because for you to get enough oomph or heat rise or capacity, whatever word you want to use, but to get enough capacity or oomph to heat up that home in a very cold environment, you almost gotta really, size that system quite high in comparison. So even in the hottest states of the US, and we see, air conditioners installed, they have to be sized properly, because if you oversize them, then, you could have issues with short cycling and humidity and things like that, right? So that's why we always talk about doing things like heat load calculations and things like that. Well, the problem in these, colder climates is you might have a very tiny home, and then they're installing these very, very large heat pump systems to try to, pull enough heat out of that air, if you will. And so anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that happens. Brian, is talking about variable tonnage. I think this might be where you start. We've talked about AI a little bit, artificial intelligence. This is where you might see a little bit of that come into play, where some sort of technology is able to tell the system, hey, I need you to, pretend to be this, well, not pretend, but I need your oomph now. And then at other times of the year, it's sort of like those trucks where it's got an 8-cylinder motor, but if you're just highway riding and you don't need the power, then it only runs off of 4 cylinders, I am pretending like I know anything about cars. So yeah, what do I think about it? I think that they've got a long way to go before they do that in all these cold places is the point. The cool thing about it, though, is we are seeing heat pumps have come a long way with inverter technology and some of the other things that they're doing. They've come a long, long way. So do I think it's going to happen? It's certainly possible. And very, very soon, actually. I have a dual fuel system with a gas furnace and a heat pump. That's awesome. Grew up in, I guess CA means California in this case. Couldn't get out of there fast enough when I retired. Yeah, I've heard there are parts. So because of the guide, because I do help people buy heating and air systems, I'm sometimes exposed or have conversations with people that I wouldn't normally have. So because of that, I've been helping folks, and one of the places is Moab, Utah. I helped a lady, and then I've helped a couple people in Arizona, and more in the Phoenix area, and then some suburb type places in Phoenix. And a lot of those places, it's funny, here on the East Coast, we always talk about how folks up north are coming to our area, folks from DC or New York coming to our small town to retire or to have a second home. I live near the coast, so a lot of folks will have, their home on the water that they're going to retire to. And so anyway, I've heard folks say the same thing and on the West Coast, that folks from California, when they're trying to, get away, they move to these areas of, where I've been helping these other folks. So more simple. The inverter runs off of temperature. I replaced an oil furnace with a gree with no strip heat. Only test this year was Christmas weekend. Yeah, Christmas was brutal this year. We had our most busiest here on the East Coast. We had our most busiest Christmas Eve ever. All three of including me, so I'm counting me, our 3 senior techs at Griffin Air were working on Christmas Eve, which has never happened before. So I doubt if the electric grid can support all the heat pumps and electric cars. It's a good point. I think that you're going to see a big push for solar. So these folks that run a lot of their appliance, their home themselves, but also sell electricity back, you're going to see even more of that. I bet the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see solar really, come into its own. We already see it, right? At least where I live, we see them, but I think you're going to see a lot of it over the next decade. You're going to see companies pop up and a lot of competition as well. It's going to become its own trade. Should I repair or replace a 40-year-old system? I guess it depends on what's wrong with it. 40 years is definitely a long time. You'd probably save money on your utility bills alone just by going with, today's 16 SEER, 15.2 SEER 2 systems. You'd probably see quite a savings just with that. But I've never been the type to just look at the age of something and just say, yep, it's time to replace. But if you do have a 40-year-old system, that is impressive. When you do a heat load calculation, or when you do a load calculation, what software do you use? And do you do block load or room by room? Is room by room needed if ductwork isn't being replaced? So Daniel, I actually sub this out. I have a guy who does this for us. I do it that way for a couple of reasons. The first reason is he's very good at it. The second reason is he would be a third party opinion. So if for, if I'm ever in a courtroom, I don't think that would ever happen over the sizing of a heating and air system, because there would be a lot of people that deserve to go to court over that. But anyway, if he were to, for some reason, mess up and quote the wrong size system, it kind of covers us at Griffin Air. And the other thing with that is, a lot of people, if you do it in-house, they expect you to do it for free. And we just don't have the manpower to do stuff like that for free. So we've always subbed it out. This guy's really good at them. And to answer your question about the room by room, that's the way he does them. So he does a room by room heat load calculation, and it helps us out, obviously, but it ultimately helps the homeowner out, so they get what they need. Brian, where are you located? We didn't have such a bad ice storm. It was just the cold was so bad. So, yeah. So, yeah, we've got a guy. In fact, I've had people message me for his information, and I don't know if he's ever helped any of them. I don't talk to him that often. But no comment, Jojo. I'll just say no comment to that question, and I'll leave it at that. But anyway, his name is Jeff. He does the heat load calculations, and we have referred him to people that didn't even live local, that he was able to help them. So Mechanicsville, nice. I lived in Richmond for probably 8 years. Hated every second of it. My wife was actually chased there one night in Carytown. So we were happy to get out of city, or Richmond specifically. But Mechanicsville's definitely got some nice areas. We like to go to a couple of restaurants up in Mechanicsville sometimes. So, previous storm, before your day. Yeah, I'm going to stay off of that one, Jojo. I was honest about them on a video one time, and they attacked me. The owner and some of their employees went on Google and left a bunch of bad reviews, and Better Business Bureau, even though they've never used my company, Griffin Air, they left us a bunch of bad reviews. So I feel comfortable in saying that, because that actually happened. We were able to get them removed by removing the video that I did, but I just avoid them like the plague. Other than what I just said, I don't say much else about them. So I'm in the woods. Yeah. So there's some parts of Mechanicsville Mechanicsville's weird, because there's like an edge of it that's still pretty, it's basically still a part of Richmond. And then there's other parts of it that are, kind of up 360 and outskirts areas. So that's pretty cool that you're right here near us, though. I am installing a Bosch 15 SEER 1.0 condenser with a 2.0 air handler. Will the SEER rating be higher? Is there an advantage to using a 2.0 air handler? I haven't kept up with their matchups as much, to be completely honest with you. Just make sure what you do is an AHRI match. Make sure that you get a certificate showing those model numbers on there, Jason. And just make sure that, the system you're installing is an AHRI match. I've never had an issue with Bosch on this, but there are some manufacturers, and I would hate for you to be the first one to find out that Bosch does pull this. But if you do not have a matching AHRI system, there are times when companies will not honor their warranties. And so I had a company called Nortec do that to me once, even though it was not my fault that it was not installed as an AHRI match. They would not honor their warranties. So I think that goes a long way, though. The thing that I do understand I'm understanding about the Bosches. So when I sold a lot of them was when they first came out, they were very inexpensive to get, and they only had the 1.0 at one point. And then they came out with the 2.0, and it was just an 18 and a 20 SEER. But as time has gone on, now they've got this 15 SEER line, and it's almost like they have, what is it, two outdoor units and 3 indoor units? Is that how I can't remember, or maybe vice versa. But their website says it. I just don't remember off the top of my head. And so depending on if you match it with this one versus this one, then you get this SEER and vice versa. So it's almost like you can kind of interchange them a little bit and get a higher or lower SEER depending on what you want and depending on the situation. We do still sell the Bosch 1.0s or the 18 SEER units, but that's usually in the case where we are trying to match them with a mobile home furnace, because we sell mostly Daikin. We're a Daikin dealer and sell just, pretty much mostly Daikin. But Daikin does not make a mobile home furnace or an inverter that will match with a mobile home furnace. So Bosch does. And so 3 outdoors and 2 indoors. Got it. So yeah, just make sure whichever of those you go with, just make sure you know that it's an HRI match. And also make sure that you are going with somebody that has installed them before. You don't want to be anybody's guinea pig. And there are some quirks to the Bosch, and we've done videos on that, making sure that the airflow is set correctly and things like that. Daikin from who? If you're asking who my supplier is, it's Johnstone. So, but yeah, so that's actually the lady that was talking about G&B. The lady I'm helping in Maryland, she is going with a Bosch. So, are mobile home furnace designs for high static? Yes, they are. Welcome, Michael. Welcome. Yeah, that's the thing about the mobile home furnaces is they're meant for high static applications, and we see from time to time people will install like a normal air handler. They'll pull an electric furnace out and put a normal air handler in there, and I'm not saying it won't work. We've seen it work, but you go through a lot of fan motors. They don't last as long, and it's just simply not meant for that high static. You're not moving enough air through there to warm all parts of the home in a lot of cases. So your system is only as good as your installer. That is true. So anyway, while we wait for a few more questions to come in, I was watching this is not me wanting to call anyone out or anything like that, but I did come across a YouTube video where a guy was talking about, he was essentially talking about why you would not want a return in a garage. Well, first of all, it's against code and it's a huge safety issue, right? Because pulling in carbon monoxide or other things that could be in a garage into the home is a problem. But he was talking about how you could have your supplies out there because the air is, being forced through there. So the idea is if the air is blowing out those vents, it can't go back into the home, right? But my argument to that, well, let me finish. So he said it's not a good idea because when you don't have a return out there, but you do have those supplies, you are essentially making the home a negative pressure environment, which can create other issues. And he's right on that. But my biggest concern with that is when the system is not running, because you're not going to leave it just running all the time. So if that blower motor is not turning and pushing air out those vents, there is a possibility that carbon monoxide and or those other things could still go back through those supply vents. So if the system's not running, you should not, it's just really not a good idea. Even if it is, I've never even tried it to see if my inspector would pass it, but I would imagine it would fail inspections, especially on new construction, if an inspector were to come across that. At least I would hope it would. So just as a general rule, if I have a homeowner that wants that, we just automatically just either A, turn them down, or B, explain to them what I'm explaining now, that they need to have a separate heating and air system, whether it be a mini split or if it's a very large garage. We've installed conventional systems in the garage, but it needs to be its own system. So when you sell the house, it will fail. So Brian, I don't know that that's true. It will fail what? You know, who would fail it? Because when you sell a house, you don't have an inspector come through. Now, you might argue and say, well, you know, a home inspector has to come through there, but that's not necessarily true. That's usually something the buyer hires, or the realtor for the buyer. They hire a home inspector to go through the home, and I have an inspector that will talk to you. Yeah, there are home inspectors that would say, hey, this is an issue. Don't buy this home, Mr. Buyer. But there are some buyers that, you know, they either ignore the inspector, or they just simply don't hire an inspector, or they don't hire a good home inspector, right? Those are all plausible scenarios. So it's not necessarily that a, you know, county inspector or a building permits inspector is going to inspect that home before it gets sold. So, you know, if you are buying a home, that's something you should also look out for. Let's see. I'm just removing somebody from the chat. I've never had to do that before. I'm glad I just figured it out all of a sudden. I talked to there's a guy that used to jump on here. He hasn't been on the last couple weeks, but there's a guy that we used to. I asked him to maybe start, being an admin or whatever the verbiage is, but somebody to help me police some of that. And so now I know how to do it, at least. So it's the first time I've had to do it. In your vlog on where returns should be, you mentioned certain places like where pets are could get clogged filters faster. I don't see a filter in my return. Should the return vent area have one? NF, it depends on your home. So there are homes that they don't have a filter grill where the return is. The filter might be in the unit itself. It could be in the return duct somewhere. So it just kind of depends on your home. Now, to answer I will say this. There should be a filter somewhere. So if you don't have a filter in the return, you know, and there's not one in the unit, you can't find one, you got to get one put in somewhere. Get a pro to take a look. Maybe you're just not seeing it, but you got to have that air filtered. And I don't care. I remember somebody told me not long ago, they said, well, oil furnaces don't need them because the heat exchanger gets so hot. I don't care. You know, filter that air before it goes through your unit. It has nothing to do. I mean, it can, but it's not. Air filters are not, their primary responsibility is not to clean the air that you breathe. It's to protect the system, right? Now, you can install better filters that can remove smaller particulates and things like that and help clean that air, but that's not their primary responsibility. So to say that air can be pulled through there unfiltered, I don't care what kind of system you have, you should be filtering it. So it's just a flag. With HVAC equipment replacement being so expensive, I think it would be. Oh, hold on, guys. I swear, if I could get through 1 week where I don't have any technical difficulties, that would be great. So if you're still on here, don't hang up on me. My monitor just went out and it's resetting here. So it looks like from my other computer, you're still here with me. So bear with me. Let me see if I can read it from this one. With HVAC equipment replacement being so expensive, I think it would be wise to have an HVAC contractor inspection of the HVAC system when purchasing a house. I agree, Carl. I don't think that's done enough. In fact, in my area, I think that that's pretty common. So we have home inspectors that will go through and they'll look at everything and they'll, you know, make up their I've seen it done different ways, but it seems like a lot of them will have like this punch sheet. So they'll have like 20 pages of things that they either checked, things they might have saw wrong, or suggestions. And in that suggestion, a lot of times I've seen some of those reports, it'll actually just say, and it says this for almost every house, recommend having a licensed heating and air professional look at the heating and air system. So, but I've seen some of the other ones. There's one home inspector in our area that he doesn't actually look at the unit. He just turns it on and he puts his hand over the vent. And if it blows cold, he marks that it blew cold. If it blows warm, he marks that. So thank you for answering my question. The furnace in my garage has a filter. I just didn't see one in the return vent. I'm learning as a homeowner and enjoying this channel. Thank you for your kind words. Yeah, that's the goal here, to try to help some folks. And this whole journey started with especially my website where I help homeowners. It all started with a lady called me and said, "Hey, do you service my area?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, as a third party unbiased opinion, then can I ask you a couple questions?" And this was years ago. And I said, "Sure." And I remember answering her questions. I wish I could find her. I don't even remember her name, but that would be kind of cool just to kind of come full circle after all these years. But she said to me when it was happening, she's like, some of the things you're telling me, no one's ever told me before. I had no idea. And it just kind of almost was like a light bulb that, that it was kind of that kind of an idea, I'm happy that the market has started to change. What year do you think that most companies will have one of the new refrigerants in the new equipment? Right now, only a couple companies have R32 or something else besides 410A that I know of, like Daikin. In what year? Well, I do think that's possible that it'll be this year. I think by the end of this year, you're going to see a few more products hit the market with A2L refrigerants. But that's just speculation. I can only go off of what I've been told. But they've got to get moving fast because it's either going to be this year or next, right? If 410A is completely phased out of new refrigerant or new equipment by January 1st of 2025, it's either this year or next, right? I mean, you're not just going to see new products. You're going to see all products that get switched over. At least you should, right? I would hope that they would have these products rolled out, especially with these companies that are going with a refrigerant that's never really been sold, mass produced in equipment. This R454B that Carrier and Trane and a couple of the other big manufacturers are putting in their systems. R32 has been around a long time. It's been used overseas by companies for years. So it's been tested, but this R454B, it's very new. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's untested in that way. And so they've got a lot. I would hope that they wouldn't wait till the last minute to roll all this out. And then 410A is gone. And then they find out there's an issue, that there's more to this than they thought. Right. So I would hope that they start getting that stuff rolling out by the end of this year. That way, you can, make an educated decision on what you want to do there, right? How long have you been in the HVAC industry? I have been in the industry for 20 years now, 20 years. And I've been owning a company for 10 years now. So I started Griffin Air the first year I moonlighted. So from May 2013 is when I started Griffin Air late night. I remember making the logo. It does not look like it does now, but it looked a little like that. It had the little spinny dial and the lightning bolt, but the dial that's over here used to be wrapped around the entire Griffin Air. So anyway, kind of giving you a visual. But nice, Brian. So Brian's here just to make fun of me. He's been doing this longer than me. But anyway, so I started Griffin Air, and I went full time March 1st of 2014. So I moonlighted and worked on the weekends starting out. I was licensed. I never did side work. Never done a side job. So other than maybe my, family, but I've never done side work. I was a licensed company right from the get-go. When I stepped foot in somebody's house, from the get-go, we were legit. Even though I moonlighted and had a full-time job for a while. So that's my story. What are your thoughts? Oh, sorry. Here we go. I want to buy a new system, but don't want to buy a 410A since it's going away. Yeah, I hear a lot of people. So if you can buy that, Tom, then I don't blame you. If you can get by, I was just talking to somebody the other day about that. Well, yesterday, I guess it was. What are your thoughts on easy starts like the ones Micro Air? If you're talking about, let me look it up. Yeah, you're talking about soft starts. I think that if you have a single stage system and it's starting to get some age, that it's a good idea. I did a whole video on soft starts. I had to switch companies that I was referring folks to, but in that video, the link goes to a different product, but it's still the same deal. It's still a soft start that does the same thing. And I go through all the benefits of a soft start in that video. You can't let the refrigerant change stop a system change. It's not that bad. How important is it that a vacuum pump be compatible with A2L refrigerants? I don't. So that I did a whole video on this, Carl. I don't understand this this whole thing with the vacuum pumps. Reclaim machines, maybe. A reclaim machine should be rated to do the refrigerant that you're using it for, right? But with vacuum pumps, how would the vacuum pump even know what refrigerant's going to go in that system to start with? That's my whole thing, because I've heard that brought up multiple times, and I don't think it should matter. I think if you are, whether you're putting R22, a drop in, a 410A, R32, whatever refrigerant you're putting in that system, the vacuum pump's going to do what it's going to do regardless. It has no idea what refrigerant's going to be put in that system afterwards. So we did a whole video on that, whether or not you need to buy new tools. I go through gauges, I go through vacuum pumps, I go through reclaim machines. We just bought a new reclaim machine, and R32 was slapped right on the side of it. The thing about this too is if you look up the what 410A refrigerant is comprised of and what R454B refrigerant are comprised of, they both have R32 in them. So, that's another thing with all this. Side work was my training. Josh, does Daikin have anything like Carrier Bryant heated dehumidification using the heat strip simultaneously with the AC coil in a modulating continuously variable system? What do you think of this? John, I'd have to look more into that. I'm not really sure. To be completely honest with you, I'm not familiar with that process. So are you saying that when it's dehumidifying, that the heat strips come on so that the air coming out isn't too cold? I'm not really sure on that. I actually was in a class not long ago where they talked about there is some technology that either Daikin created or patented where I'm wanting to say it's one of their mini splits can dehumidify without changing the temperature of the air coming out of it by using some sort of science or technology. I'm sounding dumb right now, so I usually avoid talking about this sort of stuff. But they have some sort of product that no one else has, or at least came out with that product, and now maybe other folks have copied them. But I remember them talking about that in that class, and it went over my head, and so I didn't get too crazy on that. When they start pulling out conduction, heat loss and all this stuff, I'm just like, does it dehumidify? That's I'm very cut and dry when it comes to that sort of stuff. Does it do its job? I live alone in a 4,000 square foot house in Michigan. I only use a portion of the house. Question is, I close a couple of dampers without messing with the static pressure. In short, unless it's an inverter, George, in short, the answer is no. You can't close them without messing with the static pressure. Now, will it affect the static pressure enough that you should be concerned? I guess that would depend on how many vents or dampers you plan on closing. But if you replace your air filters as often as you should, a lot of times closing one or two in the house doesn't affect it. But, you start getting folks that close more than that, and they're not replacing their air filter as often as they should. That's usually when we get a service call. So I just bought a 3.5 ton Daikin Fit complete system here in Southeast Texas, installed last Thursday. So far, so good. That's awesome, Michael. Did you go with the Daikin 1 Plus or the Daikin 1 Touch? I'm just curious. So did you get the one with the dial or the one that's just the touchscreen thermostat? What are your thoughts on products like AC Renew for older systems? I hear from some contractors that it's horrible and clogs the system, and others say it works great. So AC Renew would not clog anything. AC Renew is just simply an oil. It's a lubricant. So we actually sell a product that is very similar to AC Renew, but it has something in it that AC Renew doesn't. And I'm drawing a blank on what that is right this second. But I did a video on it, and it's a product called Boost Juice. It's made by Diversitech. And the other thing that's really good about Boost Juice is it is easy to install. So whereas AC Renew has this, big metal thing that you got to pour the oil in and all this stuff, with Boost Juice, all you got to do is connect it to each port and push a button. And so we've had homeowners and folks like that come to us saying, no one in our area, we've called all the suppliers, none of the heat and air companies can get it. And so we did start offering it on our website. If you go to New HVAC Guide and click the store button. I am a data freak. I would like to know how to get data from the system, even basic stuff like runtime, speed, power draw, etc. Is there some way to access all that data? So, Michael, I can tell you how to get into the dealer settings of the thermostat, but I will tell you that if you go in there, it can void your warranty. It does with us. So I just had this conversation with a homeowner. He's an electrician, very experienced. And I told him, I was like, I hear you. You've been doing electric work almost as long as I've been alive. And that's pretty awesome. But at the same time, I wouldn't care if you were a heating and air guy. If you are touching my unit and you're going into the settings and you're doing things, I don't even care if you're in there just to look at things, it would void our warranty. It's in writing. It's on our contracts. So, you may disagree with that, but that we just have to put that in there to cover us. But I will say, if you need to get into a Daikin 1, that the dealer settings, there is a little emblem to the right when it asks for your code, and if you tap that, it gives you the code. So there's probably some dealers that would hate me if they knew I was giving that out, but it's your thermostat. It belongs to you now. But you could void your warranty if you're in there, though, just so you know. Adding strip heat to an AC will dehumidify. It's the stat. It's only commercially. It's only commercial currently. Gotcha. Yeah, we don't do much commercial. We do a little bit. We have a vet office that we take care of, and we've got a couple restaurants, but we don't do any RTUs or anything like that. I just don't have the manpower. The thought of having, getting a crane out there and having a bunch of men. I've had a hard time just finding a helper that wants to show up and have a good attitude. So, so you went with the touch. Nice. Viper is the best coil maintenance. Have you installed any ERVs before? And do you think they are worth it? I see them mentioned on the build show all the time, but none of the contractors that came to my house for quotes mentioned ERVs. So we don't sell them here in Virginia, or at least the area that I'm located in, very much. My supplier doesn't even keep them in stock. And the reason is because of the humidity being such an issue here where I live. A lot of times if someone is either asking for an ERV or someone is recommending one for one reason or another, we get these energy auditors or some sort of expert when it comes to, air quality and things like that. And they come into the home and recommend some sort of ventilation. We usually will install a dehumidifier that pulls in the ventilation. So we don't necessarily have an ERV, but we do have our dehumidifiers do it. Let me look up one thing here. Yeah, I don't have it right in front of me right now. I thought maybe I did, but I was hoping I could pull up the one that we sell the most of, but I don't have it right in front of me. I know the one that we sell the most of is an April Air product, but I don't want to give you the wrong model number because, I don't want to send you down the wrong path. Just found a good helper. It's worth training. That's awesome. We usually have to, I feel like at Griffin Air, we have to hire like 15 of them to find one good one. Maybe I should avoid the fit. Regarding dealer access to thermostats, I just want the data, not to change any settings. Maybe through Daikin Cloud, all the data should be there. They should allow customers access their data, right? Yeah, I mean it's a touchy topic because I have actually seen message boards where they talk about this, certain thermostats and whether or not homeowners should have. In fact, my first real hater came from that. I did a video on a Honeywell 8000 and I talked about how to get the code to get in because the thing about Honeywell 8000, there's not really anything in there. It's just the programming. There's nothing. Now, if you go into the advanced settings, you could probably get pretty crazy and mess up a bunch of stuff. But as far as the normal programming, there's nothing that profound. And so that's interesting, Brian. I had not heard that. I had heard that there were some education programs out there for apprenticeships, but I didn't know that Virginia had that specifically. But anyway, I had a guy send me a bunch of messages personally because I had given out the four-digit code on that video, how to find it on a Honeywell 8000. And so anyway, some guys, my philosophy is if the homeowner bought it, it belongs to them. Now, is it my right as the company to void a warranty for one reason or another? Of course. But I don't think it's my right to tell someone that owns the product what they can and can't do with the product they now own. That's just my philosophy. A lot of heating and air guys don't agree with that, but everybody has their reasoning, I guess. So Um, let's see. Trying not to derail your work. Yeah, I actually had a conversation with a school. So we've got a local school to us where the high school students can go there and learn a trade if they're not going to go to college. And I had multiple conversations with them years ago and did not get anywhere. And then recently I had posted in our area, I was just going to do a free class and then hope that, maybe some good folks show up to that. And maybe if they want to get in the trade, they might consider us to go work for, right? And I posted that on social media, and out of nowhere, that school reached out to me. So I think, well, it hasn't gone any further than that, though. So I did message their teacher because she gave me his email, and I haven't heard back from him. But I did a video on this once. I think there's a big disconnect with trade schools. I almost think that trade schools, I don't think, and maybe I'm sure there are trade schools that do this, but you would think that there would be some sort of message board or something that if a trade school, if an employer went to the trade school and said, "Hey, I'm hiring, where can I find, can you tell some of your students or whatever," the school has that ability to say to their students, "Hey, so and so's hiring," But I think that I have a Richmond contract. Call me. Brian, you call me. I don't have your phone number, man. Call Griffin Air tomorrow and let them know that you're looking for me. But I will say this. So I think it's good. So this particular trade school, she was telling me why she would filter out certain students and things like that. So I don't think it's necessarily bad that the school might filter out, especially when they're dealing with high school students. Maybe they're dealing with some, they don't want to just refer anybody to go work at a place sort of deal. I can appreciate that, especially if they get a student that, is just, I don't know, just not a good guy, if he's just creating trouble every day and whatever. So that, I think that's appropriate to filter that. But at the same time, number in chat. Okay, I'll have to go back through the chat. I must have missed that. But anyway, I just think that the trade schools should, I think that they already educate, right? So that's one thing, but they also should provide some sort of way of stepping stone, a way of helping that student get out into the world, sort of deal. What kind of money does your third party look? I don't know what he charges, Carl. I've been asked that a few times. I should probably know it because we've paid for it a few times, but because we've had to do it for one reason or another. But I genuinely, this is not me just saying that, I don't know what he charges. I probably should know, but I don't. Some students come out wanting top dollar, only knowing the basics. Yeah, in some cases, they don't even know the basics. I think that's the real trouble, when these, I don't know, the trades are in trouble right now because I just listened to a podcast the other day where they were talking about some of the other issues, but I think that's part of this too, is you get these young people and they have options. They can go into the trades, but they can also go this other route and make more money. Now, we could argue and say, well, that route, if they were to go down that path, isn't as long term. It doesn't have as many benefits or options or compensation. But a lot of kids aren't thinking about long term. They're thinking about right now, how do I get the most amount of money for my time, right? And so that's part of this too. They want $30 an hour, but they, have never even read a tape measure before. You get everyone in school. They don't have a clue. Don't stress them so much. I think people don't know how lucrative a career in HVAC could be, so it doesn't attract some people. Yeah, I mean, I agree. They don't know how to use tools unless YouTube has a video. Darn YouTube. um, I think there is something to be said for, there's a time and place. Honestly, if I hired a guy and he was a figure it out kind of guy, and he did, he had the drive to want to learn the trade, and he, just because that's another thing I'll hear. Honestly, it's a red flag. If I'm interviewing somebody and they say, my last job, they expected me to, they only showed me twice how to do something, and then they got mad at me because I made a mistake, and I just need somebody that's going to train me for 3 months on how to do something. I usually, I already, that's kind of a red flag is the point. I would almost dare say that I would rather find somebody that is not necessarily afraid to take a little longer to do the task. Me personally, I know there's other companies that would feel differently, but I would quite appreciate a helper that pulled out his phone and watched a YouTube video trying to learn things. Brian, funny you bring up Jim. I had a meeting with Jim this past week, and we were going to feature some of that meeting. We recorded it, and we were going to feature it on a couple of videos, and the audio didn't turn out. So I just had to email him today and say, hey, we got to do something different. We're going to have to re-record. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, Jim and Brian are definitely doing some good things out there. I had another story I was going to tell you guys while we're waiting for a few more questions to come in. Give me just a second here. I'm drawing a blank on what that story was. I do. One of you guys brought up the A2L refrigerants a moment ago, and I have not heard any other states that have passed them yet. Last I heard, there's only been 5 or 6 states. So North Carolina is one of them. Virginia is not. So that'll be interesting with this whole rollout of these new products as well. They can roll them out, right? But if nobody can buy them, if the state hasn't passed it, that's another wrinkle in all of this. So met him in Atlanta and Vegas. That's nice. I've actually never met him. I was at AHR this year in Atlanta, and Jim was not there. I texted him, and he said, yeah, I'm not there. So for those of you that don't know who Jim is, he's done a couple things, but one of the things he's done most notable here recently in the last several years, he created a product called MeasureQuick, and we did a video on MeasureQuick talking about how it's a good way for homeowners to be able to tell if a contractor is doing things properly or not. So I'm not saying if they don't use MeasureQuick that they're doing things wrong, but it allows the homeowner to kind of decipher, okay, if they are using it, at least they're doing things right, is the point. And so it's kind of a clever tool that he came up with there. And I think you're going to see more companies come out with things similar to it, but he's got quite the niche there, if you will. And he's really smart. I've told him multiple times when I'm chatting with him, I'm like, yeah, I know when I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and I'm not saying that he intentionally does that, but he's just a wealth of knowledge. And I've told him multiple times, I'm like, I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room right now. I'm praying my junk Linux system holds up for at least another 3 years before replacement. I will pray with you right now. 3 more years, Linux system. What refrigerant is blue on? That's a good question. I have not laid hands on it. It pops up on my emails all the time, but and then I have used the app before, but let's see. It says, oh, it's R458A. It's an R22 replacement. So Blue On, I think, is just a brand, though, right? I mean, it's not. It's just like saying free. The word Freon is actually a product. It's a brand owned originally by DuPont. So, but yeah, so that's the answer to that. Brian says Blue On is a supplier. Come on, guys, throw something hard out there. Let's or not hard, because it's not hard to stump me, but let's throw something out there that's debatable. Let's throw a crazy one out there. What's the best heating and air brand? There you go. That's one of the questions, Brian. Since you know Jim, I was picking on him, and I was telling him, I was like, "Well, who's the bad brands?" And he won't answer that question. He just smiles. So we all have our preferences, so I would assume he does too. But he won't answer that question. Not on recording anyway. Maybe if you are, kind of, if it's just you and him, and it's, you're hanging out and it's after dinner, and maybe a couple drinks or something, maybe he'll finally share that. But he was not sharing it on that recording. So, Brian, funny you bring up the Hvac. I have a video that we should do the raw footage on it in the next day or two, but we're going to be comparing the Hvac to the Daikin Fit, and so that'll be fun. And we're gonna talk about the pros and cons kind of deal. So stay tuned for that. Can you tell me how to get rid of harmonics from the AC condenser? Kind of depends on what's causing that. If you're talking about airflow, if that's causing, some sort of sound, that, if it's got to do with the airflow. But I do know that there are some heating and air systems like the Bosch that some folks are sensitive to the sound it makes. So there are some even hearing aids that it picks up on, like a high pitched beep, like a beep is how it's been described to me. And there is a dip switch you can switch on the unit if it's making that sound. So I don't know if you could elaborate on what the sound is you're hearing. It just says get rid of harmonics. If it's got to do with airflow, it could be, if you're getting a vibration or a sound of how the airflow is going through the fins, maybe you could bend the fins or something like that. Not airflow, vibration through the house that makes harmonic sounds. And it's from the outdoor unit. That's interesting. Is it on a pad, or is it mounted on some sort of wall brackets that could be vibrating the house? That's interesting. Let's see. I've replaced my control board twice already on my furnace. What would the issue be for this back surge? Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on what's causing it, obviously. There's a couple things you could do. You could do something as extreme as install a phase monitor if you think that the electricity is part of the issue. Sometimes we had a unit a few years ago that we just could not figure it out, and come to find out, the cable going from the furnace out to the outdoor unit was shorting out every now and then. And so it had killed a couple boards. The company, the brand, the manufacturer was blaming a UV light, and I had to tell him, look, the UV light hasn't been in there. We uninstalled the UV light the last time you blamed it on the UV light. It's not the UV light. And so it come to find out it was that low voltage cable. It wasn't shorting out all the time. We would test it with our meter and it wasn't doing it. And then just every now and then we would catch it or whatever. We eventually figured it out that it was that wire. And so as soon as we pulled a new cable, it was fine. What are your recommendations on fresh air dampers in residential systems? Every house is different. You know, I has that video. I did do a video talking about where I talk about ventilation. I'm trying to remember which video it is right now, but anyway, I just did a video. I think my editor has it right now, but we talk about some of the issues that houses face today, especially issues that they did not face years ago when I first got into this trade. So again, I don't use that product. We usually use the because we're in Virginia with the humidity, we're near the water. We will usually just use some sort of dehumidifier that brings ventilation in, is how we typically will do it. But again, every house is different. So, and I don't want to tell you that, and it may not be the best fit for your home. I usually tell folks, because local pros will know what the fix is, right? They do this every day. I'll usually tell them to get a couple of different opinions from local pros. I can't buy the fit. Not airflow. This day and age, I'd put a surge protector on every piece of equipment. We do. On anything that's inverter, we install surge protection now. In fact, some brands, I don't know that any of them have come straight out and said that they won't honor a warranty if it doesn't have surge protection, but they're putting it in all their classes and things like that. Like they're saying, you got to have surge protection with our inverter systems. It's pretty much right out of the box. I wonder if that, I've actually wondered about this before. I wonder when they say that, they can't say they're not going to honor the warranty, because in that case, they might have to have the surge protection installed right from the get-go themselves, maybe. I don't know. Probably not, but I'm just saying. Line set is, that's true. The lines, that's a really good point, Brian. The line sets could be the issue on that harmonic sound. So I've had that before. I've heard of that, folks, horror stories where they're having all these issues. It's on a cement pad somewhere. I saw about grounding with a metal rod. I bet Brian might be onto something there. You might have line sets that are causing this issue, and sometimes you have to pinpoint it, right? So I don't know where the line sets run in your home, but if it does run up through a wall some way somehow, or to the attic, just simply having somebody grab a hold of them and see if the sound changes at all, that would tell you a lot. Let's see. Oh, did I miss a question? My furnace is located in my attic at the end of the house. Should I consider moving it to the central middle part of the house in the attic, or my crawl space to avoid long duct runs? Again, that's a hard question, Ryan. That has to do with, you might have to, every house is different. So I will say this. So when you say long duct runs, we might be thinking of two different things, because I've seen duct runs pretty long, right? If you have houses that are, pretty large, or for whatever reason. The thing is, when they lay out their ductwork, though, they need to account for that. And so I have even seen guys, they'll take a couple ducts that are real close to the system and add static to them, whether it be a manual damper, or, literally just kind of run a couple 90s. It might only needed to go 10 feet with 190, And so they, somehow figure out a way to make it run further than that, or they go up the line. So instead of, if you've got your vent here where your register here, and you could come straight out of your duct into it, you might go further down the trunk line, come out, and then go back to it to add static to it because you've got long duct lines. So anyway, I think the answer to your question is every house is different, and it just kind of depends. I think overall the answer generally would usually be yes. Shorter duct runs means less static and things like that, but every house is different. I'd hate for you to do that only to find out that, it was set up that way, and now you're having more issues because now you've moved the system. You took away some of that static. GRI is more sophisticated than the fit, even though it's non-communicating. Look forward to the review. I'm not sure I understand what you mean by sophisticated. I think that the fit is meant to serve a market where folks can get the benefit of a communicating inverter system, but the fit does bring things to the table that the Flex does not. And we are going to talk about that in the video coming up, that is. Let's see, what R value for ductwork insulation do you recommend for inverter systems? I had a contractor tell me recently I needed R8 insulation for an inverter system. I don't think the type of system it is should affect what the R value should be of the insulation. I think the area you live in plays a role. I also think that the better the R value is, the higher the R value is, generally is the higher it is, the better, right? So the better those ducts are sealed and the better they're insulated, the better in general, right? But there is a such thing of money, having those ducts installed, so you're not, sometimes people will go with a, lower end option, but they saved money, if that makes sense. One thing we see way more than we did even just 10 years ago is these folks doing, I call it spray foam, but basically this foam that you can spray on the ductwork, and it's this yellow looking spray foam that expands after it's been sprayed on there. And we're seeing that more and more on ductwork. So, it depends on what part of the country you're in, but I've never heard of an inverter system affecting the decision on what the R value should be. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe your area is different. Do communicating units require special thermostat cable like shielding? Some units, yes, Carl. Some units, yes. Some units, no. For example, the VRV Life that Daikin sells, I believe it has to be shielded. I think the VRV Life does. GRI is less sophisticated and runs off coil temperature. Yeah, right. So I think it depends on what you mean by sophisticated. Does it look cosmetically better? Maybe that's up to the person that is installing it. I think the fit, being that it's smaller in size and generally, and it has the same technology as a high-end communicating inverter system that can do 20 SEER. That's the thing a lot of people don't understand. The fit, if it had a larger coil, if they built it to where it was, 4 feet tall, the fit would probably be 20 SEER. It has the right guts and the technology, but that's not what they wanted. They wanted to serve a certain market. They wanted to have a less expensive product so that folks could have an inverter system that is super efficient. And part of that is the SEER isn't the end all here. Sometimes buying if you do math at the end of the day, you could have spent 25 grand on a system or 15 grand on a system. And so you got a $10,000 difference there. And then you have the system that even though it's 20 SEER, how do I want to say this? There's not enough time for you to get the savings there, if that makes sense. Well, the fit, you're going to get those days on mild days where it's barely running, even though it doesn't necessarily have that large coil or that high SEER rating is kind of the point. I'm thinking about adding a dehumidifier with fresh air vent in it, like the April air. Yeah, we have an April air in my actually in my house. We put a dehumidifier down in the basement to lower the humidity. Brian, I'm ignoring some of your comment. It does run up in the wall in the attic. Yeah, Shanna, that's where I would start. I bet Brian's right on that. Agree is huge. Communication is a dinosaur. Warranty and dead. Agree is heavy. Yeah, I mean the fit. I could pick one. I mean, I could just bear hug it and pick it up myself. And you could put it. I remember back in the old days, they used to joke about how you could buy a 1.5 ton, heat pump. They were so small, and you could put it in the back of a car. And they said those days are over because of these new SEER ratings. Well, the fit brought those days back. You can put a fit in the back of a car. What is a good formula for calculating the changeover temperature for a hybrid heat pump system? You should watch my video on balance point. I just did a video about 10 videos ago. Go back through that video. I believe it's called something like how to set the balance point or how to determine the balance point. And I go through, I can give you the gist of it now, but go through that video. The point is every house is different, and figuring out what that balance point is. A lot of people like to say, well, my heat pump heats down. It can still provide heating down to this temperature. But what they don't understand is because of the age of their home or the insulation or whatever, even though that heat pump can still produce heat, the heat rise is not quite there. And there is that balance point that they've got to figure it out to save energy. And it's kind of easy to figure it out in some cases, and it's literally just as simple of set that thing. If you know how, set that thing down at like 10 degrees and see if you're cold and see if it's bringing on the second stage heat. If it is, come on up to 20 degrees and so on, figure out what that balance point should be. Let's see, let me make sure I'm not skipping over anybody here. I avoid communication systems because it becomes a dinosaur when they don't want to support it. Have you used a product like AeroSeal to seal ductwork? I have not personally ever used AeroSeal. I think it's a great product. I've considered it. I'll get these little notifications where they'll say, would you like to become a dealer in your area? And I've looked at things like that, but I just haven't done it yet. We're a small. I only have 5 employees. We got up to I think 9 at one point, and so if I find 4 more good employees, I have no problems going back up to 9. But right now, we're kind of hanging on to what we have and hoping to find 1 or 2 more. So is where we're at right now. Would a Goodman HE or 80% be a good for a 2,800 square foot home with a finished basement? Of course, I bring this up because of rising natural gas prices. I also have a 16 SEER AC unit. Kidro, I think the answer to your question is there's a lot to this question. So where are you at in the country? What are your local pros recommending? And, as far as it, we talked about this a second ago, but just swapping out a system, with the BTU ratings of your furnace, with the heat rise the way it is, and you go switching over to a heat pump, it doesn't always compare apples to apples. If you do a proper heat load calculation, you might find out that you need to size the system differently as well. So, I think that your question is quite loaded there, and it's hard to just give you a cookie cutter answer to that. Yeah. So I have to commit all purchases to Johnstone to purchase fit. I am not that sold. That's interesting, Brian. I did not have to make that kind of a commitment. Um, to this day, I still purchase products elsewhere. So they must have a lot of Daikin dealers in your area for them to say that to you. Um, SmartStat will log system operation and basically give a real life data log of the house if the current system runs. Illinois contractor tried to sell me a ream. I said no. Um, have you had bad luck with ream before? Um, I'm not a huge fan of ream either, but I have friends that won't install anything else. So I, anyway, I was basing it off of future problems of the system. I have an HE that's problematic here and there. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It kind of depends on like I don't think Ream is horrible or anything like that, but I do think that for me there's better brands in the grand scheme of things. But we did a video. I actually did a video where I had a guy on that he loves Ream, and I had him on for that reason because I have I agree, Brian. It's all about the installer in a lot of cases, but I have I have folks that watch our videos, and I don't want them to think that just because I like Ford and you like Chevrolet, that you should always go with Ford or anything like that. The other thing is, if I say this in a lot of videos, no one brand is best in every market. So, for example, we love Daikin. I would, it would take a lot for me to sell anything else at this point because I just really like what they're doing. They're, the cutting edge, they're at the forefront of a lot of things. They have a lot of folks copying them on a lot of things. And, you know, the, I'm not, I've said this before. If they stop being, in my opinion, the best at some point and someone else passes them, I have no problems looking elsewhere. But while they're the best, and I think they are, if you're in a part of the country that you can't get them, so if you're in if you're in an area that you just can't, you don't have a good supplier for them, then it would be silly for you to push hard and say, I absolutely have to have this product. It's like buying a Ferrari, and Ferrari's supposed to be so great and it'll drive so fast, but you can't find anybody that'll work on it, or you can't find a part for it if something went wrong with it. It's there's no one brand that's best in absolutely every market, in my opinion. Better Supply House, I can help you with selling other stuff. I can help you sell Daikin, Brian. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, Brian, I would love to, especially if you've been doing it that long and you live so close. If you want to grab lunch sometime, I am up for that. Daikin is a Goodman with a different sticker. They didn't change anything that I've seen. That may be true for their 14 SEER stuff, but I have to disagree with you on everything else. Ferrari is a second car. So, HVAC technician talk. You must be a podcast, possibly. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's easy to say that with some things, but I think you could say that about a lot of brands that that they're basically sending different products down an assembly line and slapping different stickers on it. And I'm not saying Daikin hasn't done that with certain products, but when you start talking about products like their Fit and the VRV Life and some of the other things that they offer that simply no one else offers, that's where the a lot of guys that try to get on this, they'll bash this brand and say this brand's the best and this and that. And they, when you start talking about things like the VRV Life, when they have things that no one else offers, that is, that's just my opinion. So what have that done? Because I don't see it, John Israel. Okay, John, I've seen some of your stuff. Um, yeah, I mean that's just the first thing I would start with is the VRV Life. But when you start looking, if you look into their Eco One system, they're now offering things that no one else offers with their air monitors and things like that. So I just everybody has their preference. So if you don't like them, then fine. That is all I would say about that. Let's see. I'm not talking about VRV. I'm talking about residential. Yeah, the VRV can be sold in residential too. We've installed a bunch of the VRV lights in residential houses. Daikin puts out good stuff. So I'm just jealous. Brian, what do you normally sell? I'm just curious, being that you're so close to me. Um, you actually have a few suppliers in your area that we will sometimes make the trip up your way. So we'll come to Ashland from time to time to deal with your, there's a few suppliers. I'm not going to name any of them, but there are a couple suppliers down in the Newport News area that I'll avoid from time to time. I'll just go ahead and make the trip up your way. Thoughts on AirQuest? Let's see. AirQuest. I'm not we do not have any AirQuests in our area. I don't know, from the looks of it, it looks like it's a ICP. So ICP has a decent reputation in the area. Yeah, so yep. John says it's ICP. There are guys that love ICP products that have been installing them for years upon years, even in the days when, Carrier and ICP were very different. I have a friend of mine that was, a very, very Heil. He was drinking the Kool-Aid for Heil back in the day, and he even went and toured their factory and all that good stuff. I think ICP has a decent reputation, and I would say that they don't have a lot of the bells and whistles that some of them have, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I would say worry less about the brand and worry more about the company. So if you have a good company that's pushing that AirQuest brand, then, and they're going to stand behind it, then, go with the good company, not so much the brand. Are you still selling Bosch IDS? It seems like you're soured on them after your humidification problem. I haven't had any humidification problems with them. I've heard other people have humidification issues with them. We do sell Bosch from time to time in mobile homes and things like that. But in fact, I put a Bosch in my home. So I don't hate them or anything like that. I think they bring something to the table that a lot of other companies don't. But there's still a Chinese product, and that, a lot of people get offended. I get comments all the time. They'll say, Chinese product, don't you realize everything's made in blah, blah, blah. Even the products made in America, all the stuff comes from China is the comments I always get. I disagree. I mean, when I lay hands on some of the stuff made in America, I do see a difference. Now, that may not be true for certain industries when it comes to cars and things like that. But when it comes to heating and air equipment, the stuff made here is better in most cases. I can't say in all, but in most cases, if it's a product made in North America, it is typically overall usually more superior of a product. Let's see. Agree price point beats most. That is true, Brian, especially for the SEER ratings. Let's see, 18 to 20 SEER for 14.2 price. Yeah. There's a lot of people that have jumped on that Gree train. I'm not on it yet, but they have approached me, our local supplier, to sell them. And, we're going to do, as I said, we're going to do a video on them soon, comparing the two, the Flex against the Fit. But, if I get a customer that if it does serve a certain niche, I will say it's got that same technology, that non-communicating inverter technology like the Bosch does. But there are things that the Bosch can do that not even the Flex can do. According to my local rep, he said that when I take these Bosches and I match them with these mobile home furnaces with a coil, according to him, the Flex can't do that. And so, that's another thing. So right now, the Flex doesn't bring, other than price point, they're not really bringing anything to the table. It's one thing to say, oh, well, they're cheap. Well, yeah, but there's also something to be said for you get what you pay for, right? I'm going to probably be wrapping up. It's the chat has kind of, gotten wound up here all of a sudden. So, I hate to cut it off, but we are going to wrap up here in just a few minutes. Depending on the air handler you pair it with. Yep. Did GE really get back in the central? Apparently they did. I have a couple customers on the West Coast saying that GE is being offered in their areas again. And one of the customers, it was that same deal. It was I believe it was an inverter non-communicating system. So I don't know what the deal is there. I don't know if it's someone just licensing the name or what, but I have a few customers that we've helped with our guide that they are being offered GE in their markets. So it seems like most of them are on the West Coast, but I just thought that was interesting. Of course, GE used to be in the game. They were the first ones with the spine fin coil that Trane hangs their hat on these days. And of course, American Standard bought that out from GE, and then Trane eventually bought it, American Standard. So that's how that whole deal ended up. But to see that name kind of out there again is kind of, crazy. So let's see. I was so glad when GE got it out of business. Bosch and Gree are efficient. Humidity is not the concern. Inverter units will tend not to dehumidify as well. In general, I would just say I would disagree with that, Brian, that the idea of a communicating inverter system is it's going to run at a lower, capacity and run longer, dehumidifying better, right? So, I would disagree a little bit on the assumption that all inverters fall into that same category, but at the same time, they all serve their purpose, right? I actually think we're going to see more folks get into this non-communicating inverter technology game, especially as we continue to see government ratings get higher and higher and their minimums. You're going to see more people dip their toe into that because they can offer a less expensive option, right? They don't have to have this $500 thermostat. So I think you're going to see more of that as time goes on. But the humidity is, especially in my area, is a big deal. They've got to figure that out across the board. So GE is an allied product. Okay, so GE. That's interesting. If they're being made by Armstrong and the guys on the Linux side of things, that'll be I haven't laid hands on one. We don't have any good suppliers in our area, but that is, we're seeing them more and more on the West Coast for sure. So, I like Medea's line. Johnny, I'd be curious, when you say you like Medea's line, are you talking about mini splits or is it some sort of unitary stuff? Ignore me. I'm good. I am ignoring some of the stuff because I've got to get through this. I wanted to make sure I got all the questions answered. So anyway, I'm into resistance reheat in Virginia. Anyway, we are going to wrap up here in just a second. If you've got a question you want to throw out there, please do. But as always, we'll be back next week at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with our show answering questions live. We've had a pretty lively conversation this week in comparison to some weeks, so that's been good. I'll give you guys another minute or two. And I might even give you a snapshot of some of the videos we have coming out. So ductless, yeah. So yeah, when it comes to the mini splits, I think, in my opinion, there's a couple guys right at the top, Daikin and Mitsubishi, and then it's really just everybody else. But that's just my opinion. We do have some videos coming up here soon. I'm going to be doing a video soon on the Daikin Sierra line. If you're not familiar with that, the Daikin Sierra is they came out with that line to be able to give folks an option to have, what is probably the most common, at least in our area, the most common multi-zone mini split that we see. And a lot of times it's just folks that are installing, just a couple rooms, small rooms, wall hung units. And so the Sierra kind of fits that mold where you can have a very inexpensive option and still have a mini split multi-zone unit. Medea makes Bryant and Carrier's ductless. I don't think that's true. I think Toshiba makes Carrier and Bryant stuff. At least that's what I've been told. John, you got anything on that? I know John seems like he knows some of the brands and who's affiliated with who on that. But I know for the longest time, Toshiba was the main company making Carrier stuff. We've also, I know I've been talking about this for a while, but we do have a video coming up about the Sensi 2. We did that on a live. We showed that on a live video not long ago, but we're going to actually do an in-depth. I'm going to, fire it up, put some power to it and let you see what it looks like and setting it up and so on. Let's see. A man and Daikin are the same. Ream and Root are the same too. That's correct. Toshiba makes Carrier mini splits. Yeah, that's what I've always been under the impression. And then of course I told you guys about the Flex versus the Fit video coming up. Nope, not anymore. Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't even keep up with that stuff anymore because companies do change from time to time. There is a company that at the beginning of this show that somebody was asking about. They make DIY units and they've switched manufacturers a few times. So, I don't really keep up with that stuff anymore. It's so much. I mean, I do a little bit, but when it comes to licensing and, different brands making different, that's the thing. I mean, we all know this, there's only about 8 different manufacturers and then there's like 100 different brands, and there's nothing saying that these guys can't switch, right? What if tomorrow Trane were to buy the Bryant name, I don't think that's going to happen, right? But it could if they come up with enough money, right? So I don't know. I focus less on that, and I'll say this: we are going to wrap up here in just a second. But if you are still hanging out, I think folks focus way too much on the brands. I think that if you are a homeowner in the market for a heating and air system, you should get some quotes, find the company that gives you the warm fuzzies, and go with whatever brand they will recommend and stand behind. And you can even ask them. I think it's a good question to ask. Why do you sell what you sell? If their answer is, well, I inherited my father's business and he always sold this brand. So that's, I just stuck with that. Well, that's not what I would want to hear. I want to hear somebody say, I sell this brand for this reason, that reason, and this reason, and give you some real reasons why they sell what they sell. And if you find a really good company that answers that question in that way, then, go with that brand, right? Is the point. Measure quick feed changes, wrong place. I don't know what that means, Brian. Did they change their fees? Is that what you're trying to say? As of 2 months ago, when I installed one, it's Medea/Bryant. Send pictures, Johnny. Yeah, send pictures. Send pictures to this. I'm going to put my email address down here. Send pictures to that email address and we'll show it on next week's show. We'll go through that. So how do I do that? Yeah, just take pictures and then email them to that email. Do I use Measure Quick? So I do not currently. There's a good question. We are looking into it. I've got to get all the tools to get it set up correctly. So we do not, honestly, until I found it, I have the wireless gauges, the field piece ones that you can connect with, or not wireless, hoseless ones that I'll usually, if I'm running a late night call and I just want to make sure the system is charged correctly, sort of deal. But other than that, I usually, to this day, I still use the old school, analog gauges with the needles. That's what I trained on. I can do quick math. I can usually look on those needles and tell you what my subcool measurement is within a few seconds. Whereas my guys are over there, okay, I got to change the setting on my digital and I got to, and I'm usually, done diagnosing the system by the time they figured out what their subcool is. So it's more of a speed comfort thing for me, but avoid testo. Yeah. So anyway, it's my friend. Yeah. I think it's great. Here's where I really think it's great. It's great for the companies and the customer really more than the technician. Because if you get somebody that's less experienced and they get out there and they do all their measurements correctly and the system, the Measure Quick is actually helping them diagnose the system, even if they're less experienced, the homeowner can take comfort in knowing that they're covering all their bases, if nothing else, right? And of course, the heat and air company can do that too. What brand of HVAC tools do you use? Just curious. I'm not brand loyal, to be honest. For me, my old boss used to throw my tools across job sites and say, "Get these Mickey Mouse tools out of here," because he would, only use specific ones. I don't know if you're asking me specifically, Brian. Ryan, you might have been asking Brian. But I'm not brand loyal to anybody. I always buy, if I need a pair of pliers, I buy the best ones I could find at whatever my budget is. So I have some Klein tools. I have some field piece stuff. I have some, my linesman pliers they're the ones that have the extra little grip thing. Who makes those? I think Crescent might make those. So again, I'm not brand loyal to anybody. I've had employees that will only buy Milwaukee stuff. If Milwaukee makes that, they buy Milwaukee, and everything's red and all this stuff. I've just never been like that. So think video to snapshot. I can help your life. We're gonna wrap up in just a second. What kind of gauges do y'all use, digital or non? Yeah. So as again, I answered that. So a couple of you guys can answer that, but no gauges, probes are clean. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank y'all. We've got it looks like 17 people. We've had over 200 people on here tonight, so I appreciate your support. We'll be back again next Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you aren't a subscriber, please subscribe. Obviously, that helps, and we just appreciate it. So y'all have a great week, and we'll see you next week.